Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory.
Oh, yeah.
And
This classic.
it's a pretty influential framework, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the business world.
Yeah, it's, pervades a lot of thinking these days.
For sure. For sure. And, you sent over some really interesting materials for this. We've got, like, the academic paper that lays out the theory.
Yeah.
We've got a website that shows how it's applied.
Yeah.
And even some research that connects Hofstede's dimensions to COVID data, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, how widespread the applications of this theory can be.
Yeah. I'm excited to dive in. I feel like it can help us decode human behavior.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we jump into like the, dimensions and data and all that,
Yeah.
maybe we should start with just like the concept of culture.
Sure.
How do we even define that?
Yeah, so Hofstede defines culture as the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one group or category of people from others.
Okay.
So it's like,
So it's not just individual quirks.
yeah, not just individual.
It's like shared values, beliefs.
It's this underlying programming that we get from the groups that we're a part of.
Yeah, like a mental operating system almost that we inherit. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So how do we go from this big idea of culture to like something we can actually like measure and compare?
Yeah, well, this is sort of the genius of Hofstede, I think, is that he had this dimensional approach where he breaks down culture into these 6 specific dimensions.
Yeah.
And each one is a spectrum
Gotcha.
where different cultures score high or low.
So it's kind of like a personality profile?
Yeah, like a cultural personality profile.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, and so you can see where cultures might diverge.
Oh, interesting.
Or potentially clash.
Yeah, okay, cool. So before we get into the 6 dimensions themselves,
Okay.
I am curious about the origins of this model.
Yeah.
Like, did Hofstede just, like, pull these dimensions out of thin air?
Yeah.
Or, like, how did this come about?
Yeah, well, he was building on previous research. So people like Kluckhan and Strotbeck had already laid some groundwork.
Okay.
Thinking about universal categories of culture.
Gotcha.
But what really set Hofstede apart, I think, was his access to this unique data set.
Okay.
So back in the 1970s,
Okay.
he analyzed survey data from IBM employees.
Okay, so we're talking about IBM.
We are.
Specifically employees.
From over 50 countries.
50 countries, wow. Okay, so what made that sample so valuable?
Well, the genius of it is that it was a controlled group.
Okay.
Because they all worked at IBM. They had similar jobs, backgrounds.
Right.
The main variable was nationality.
Okay.
So that allowed him to isolate the impact of national culture on people's values and beliefs.
Like a gold mine for understanding cultural differences.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So starting from this like massive data set, he identified 6 key dimensions where cultures vary.
Right.
I'm ready to hear about these 6 dimensions.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's start with the first one. Power distance.
Power distance.
What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so power distance, or PDI, is the extent to which less powerful members of a society accept and expect that power is distributed unequally.
Yep.
So it's really all about how comfortable a culture is with hierarchy and authority.
Gotcha. So a high PDI score means that like people are comfortable with a top-down structure.
Yes.
Low PDI is more egalitarian.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah, so for example, in a high PDI culture like Malaysia or Mexico, you generally see people are very accepting of directives from superiors.
Okay.
And there's a clear sense of like knowing your place in the hierarchy, whereas in a low PDI culture like Denmark or Sweden, you see much more emphasis on shared decision-making, open communication between bosses and subordinates, less emphasis on like formal titles.
Right, yeah.
Status symbols, that kind of thing.
This already has like major implications for how you would manage a team.
Oh, for sure.
Like if you're coming from, let's say, a U.S. background, which is relatively low PDI, and you're managing a team in Japan, which is high PDI, you might run into some problems if you're encouraging like open debate and you expect your team to challenge your ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah, they might see that as a sign of weakness or indecisiveness.
Yeah, like, what are you doing? You're the boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us what to do.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so major recipe for cultural misunderstandings.
Yeah.
If you're not aware of this stuff.
For sure.
Okay, so what about uncertainty avoidance?
Okay, so uncertainty avoidance, or UAI, gets at how a society copes with ambiguity and the unknown.
Okay.
So cultures that score high on UAI tend to crave structure, rules, predictability.
Okay.
They're risk-averse and prefer to stick to established procedures.
So like Greece, Portugal.
Greece, Portugal, yeah. Good examples.
Okay, so a workplace with high UAI, you'd see a lot of emphasis on detailed planning.
Yeah.
Strict deadlines.
Right.
No one wants to rock the boat.
Exactly.
Low UAI is more flexible and adaptable.
Yeah, much more comfortable taking risks. Experimenting with new approaches.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, individualism versus collectivism, this is a big one.
It is a big one.
Especially when you're talking about global teams.
Yes, definitely.
Like collaboration.
Yeah, so individualistic cultures that score high on IDV, they prioritize personal goals, independence, self-reliance.
Okay.
So you see that in countries like the U.S. or Australia.
Makes sense.
Where individual achievements is really valued, standing out from the crowd.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas collectivist cultures with low IDV scores, like China or Venezuela, they emphasize group harmony, loyalty, shared responsibility.
So it's about the well-being of the group over the individual.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool. So you can imagine, even in a simple brainstorming session, you got people from those two different cultures.
Totally.
The individualists are going to be jumping in, trying to show off their creativity.
Yeah.
The collectivists are going to be more hesitant to speak up.
Yeah, you got it.
Just wanting to make sure everyone in the group is good.
It's fascinating, yeah.
Yeah.
How different values play out.
Yeah, okay. So masculinity versus femininity.
Right. This one's always interesting.
Does this one actually have to do with, gender?
Not in the way you might think.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit of an unfortunate name.
Okay.
But it's really about the values that are dominant in a culture.
Okay.
So masculine cultures with high MAS scores like Japan or Austria, they emphasize assertiveness, ambition, competition, material success.
Okay, so the classic, Wolf of Wall Street type of...
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, they often have that live-to-work mentality where achievement and recognition are the drivers.
Okay.
And then feminine cultures scoring low on MAS, like Sweden or Costa Rica.
Okay.
They prioritize nurturing, collaboration, work-life balance, caring for others. So more of a work-to-live mentality.
Okay, yeah, so you could see how that would play out in, company culture.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And how they treat their employees.
For sure.
Yeah.
Different approaches.
Okay, this is fascinating. We've got 2 more dimensions to explore.
Yeah.
But let's take a quick pause.
Okay.
Hear a word from our sponsors.
Sounds good.
And we'll be back to dive into the last 2.
All right, so we're back, and we've got 2 more dimensions.
Yeah. 2 more to go.
To unravel.
I'm ready.
Long-term orientation and indulgence versus restraint.
Okay.
Both of these, I think, can really challenge our assumptions about what drives people.
Okay, let's start with long-term orientation.
Right.
What does it mean to be long-term oriented?
Yeah, so imagine a society that's got its gaze fixed on the horizon.
Okay.
That's essentially what long-term orientation, or LTO, captures. Cultures scoring high on this dimension, like China or South Korea, they really prioritize the future. Wow. They value things like perseverance, thrift, adaptation, and see delayed gratification as a path to success.
It's kind of like playing the long game.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of wanting the reward now, they're willing to wait and put in the work.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's very rooted in Confucian values.
Okay.
Where hard work, education, building a legacy for future generations are really emphasized.
Okay.
In contrast, short-term oriented cultures like the U.S. or Nigeria tend to focus more on the present or the past. They value tradition, immediate gratification, maintaining social stability.
So how would that play out in a business context?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's like a long-term oriented company would be more likely to invest in R&D. Yes. Even though it might take a long time to see a return.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Whereas short-term is we need to see results now.
Exactly, yeah. Quick wins, immediate results.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sticking to established practices.
Gotcha, okay. What about indulgence versus restraint?
Okay, so this dimension is all about how a culture regulates gratification of basic human desires and needs.
Okay.
So indulgent cultures with high IVR scores like Brazil or Mexico, they tend to be more optimistic. They value personal freedom, encourage the pursuit of enjoyment and leisure.
So a workplace in an indulgent culture.
Yeah.
It's more relaxed.
Yeah, more relaxed atmosphere.
People are happier, celebrating successes, maybe more flexible work-life balance.
Exactly, yeah. People are more open about expressing their emotions.
Okay.
Taking breaks for leisure, generally embracing like life's pleasures.
Okay, so restrained cultures are like the opposite of that.
Yeah, so restrained cultures with low IVR scores like Russia or Egypt.
Okay.
They emphasize stricter social norms, self-control.
Okay.
More pessimistic view of life.
So you can imagine that's a much more formal,
yes,
controlled work environment.
Yes, absolutely.
It's less room for like goofing off.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so we've covered all 6 dimensions. I want to bring in some of the real-world research that you mentioned, especially that COVID study.
Yeah, that was a fascinating one.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So that research by Chang and Wu was looking at Hofstede's model.
Okay.
But applied to a global crisis.
Okay.
They were analyzing correlations between the dimensions and COVID data across 6 WHO regions.
So basically they're looking at how different cultures with their own values and tendencies responded to the pandemic.
Exactly.
What kind of connections did they find?
They found some really interesting correlations, particularly with power distance, individualism versus collectivism, and uncertainty avoidance. For example, regions with higher power distance scores tended to have lower rates of COVID infection and death.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
At least in the early stages?
At least in the early stages.
It's kind of counterintuitive, I feel like.
Yeah, you would think that maybe more hierarchical societies would be slower to respond.
Right.
But the researchers suggest that in high PDI cultures, people are more accustomed to following directives.
Makes sense.
From authority figures.
Okay.
So when the government implemented like lockdowns and mask mandates, citizens in these cultures may have been more likely to comply, which led to more effective containment early on.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a cultural value that in some cases might seem disadvantageous.
Right.
Actually helped in this case.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. What about individualism versus collectivism? I'm guessing that played a role in how different cultures like embraced social distancing or didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. As you might expect, individualistic cultures where personal freedom is so prized had a harder time implementing and adhering to those strict measures.
Right, because you're basically asking people to limit their own freedoms.
Right.
For the good of the group.
Yeah, and that's a very collectivist idea.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it presented some unique challenges. In those highly individualistic societies,
makes sense.
It shows the complexity of applying these dimensions.
Right.
It's not always a simple equation.
It's not like this culture is better at this.
Exactly. Yeah. It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
And even uncertainty avoidance played a role in the pandemic response.
How so?
Well, cultures with high uncertainty avoidance who crave stability and clear rules, they had a really hard time dealing with all the unknowns.
Yeah. All the evolving information.
Exactly.
The ambiguity, the changes in guidelines, the lack of definitive answers really created a lot of anxiety in those cultures.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So this is a really good example of how, like, this model can help us understand the world.
Yeah.
Even in the face of, like, a global crisis.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really interesting. It's not just theoretical. It's got real-world implications.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to the enduring relevance of Hofstede's work.
Even decades later.
Yeah, this has been super interesting.
Yeah.
We've gone from defining culture to, like, its impact on pandemic response.
Like a wide range of applications.
Yeah, and we've really only just scratched the surface.
We really have. I mean, we could talk about how these dimensions influence negotiation styles.
Yeah.
Marketing strategies.
Oh, for sure.
Leadership approaches.
Tons more to explore.
So much more, yeah.
But for now, we need to take another quick break.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and wrap up this whole deep dive.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been going through this whole world of Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating. I'm like looking at the world differently already.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to the big picture.
Okay.
Like, what's the significance of Hofstede's work? Why should we care?
Yeah, well, I think it's more relevant now than ever.
Okay.
You know, in our globalized, interconnected world, we're interacting with people from all these different backgrounds all the time.
Constantly, yeah.
Yeah, at work, online traveling.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a framework, like Hofstede's, it's easy to just assume everyone sees the world the same way you do.
Right.
And that can be dangerous.
Yeah, for sure.
It can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts.
Missed opportunities even.
Missed opportunities, yeah.
Yeah.
So Hofstede's work gives us this tool to decode those cultural differences.
To understand where things go wrong.
Right, where those misinterpretations might arise.
Okay.
And to bridge those gaps.
So it's not just about avoiding cultural faux pas.
Right.
It's about, like, deeper understanding, empathy.
Yes, absolutely.
More effective collaboration.
Yeah. Imagine if, like, business leaders, policymakers, educators, healthcare professionals.
For everyone, yeah.
Had this cultural awareness.
What a world that would be.
It's exciting to think about the potential to resolve conflicts, build relationships, create more inclusive societies.
It's like having a cultural decoder ring or something.
Yes.
It's pretty cool. And it's not just about understanding other cultures.
Right.
It's about understanding our own.
That's so key. Yeah. You can use Hofstede's model for self-reflection.
Right.
Examine the dimensions that shaped your own upbringing.
Yeah.
Values.
Like holding up a mirror.
Yeah.
Seeing our own biases.
Yeah. That self-awareness is so essential for personal growth. Right. Communication.
This has been so eye-opening, honestly.
To hear that.
It's given me so much to think about.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning.
Right.
There's so much more to explore.
Okay.
We mentioned Hofstede's website.
Yeah, www.geerthofstede.nl.
It's a great starting point.
Yeah. If you're curious and you want to learn more.
Yeah. And as you explore, keep in mind that culture's not static.
Right.
It changes. It's influenced by globalization, technology, all these things.
So Hofstede's model helps us make sense of those changes. The complexities of, like, cultural interactions.
Absolutely. Yeah. It helps us appreciate human diversity.
This has been a true revelation. I feel like I have so many new things to think about.
I'm so glad.
So to our listeners, embrace curiosity.
Keep exploring.
Challenge your assumptions.
Yes, the world is full of fascinating perspectives.
Yeah, and you might learn something about yourself along the way.
Absolutely.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.